Good afternoon. I'm Faye Shapiro, publisher with CommPro.biz, and I am thrilled to be joined by Art Stevens and Rich Jachetti of the Stevens Group. We are here today to talk 2018 in review, the big takeaways in the world of mergers and acquisitions in the public relations and digital marketing agency business. Rich and Art, thank you so much for joining me today, and we welcome your insight to be shared with the CommPro community. Before we get started and start diving into the Q&A, Art, if you could set the framework for us, tell us a little bit about the Stevens Group.
Well, thank you, Faye. Thanks for inviting us on this very, very important and pertinent subject. And greetings to you, my colleague, Rich Jachetti. The Stevens Group was founded about 5 years ago, but I have had a long career in working in the mergers and acquisitions space in the PR agency industry, and subsequently digital marketing firms, which play a major role in the PR and communications business today. I come from a public relations agency background. I used to head Lopes & Stevens, which became one of the top 20 independent public relations firms back in the 90s, and I sold my firm to Publicis and started working in the consulting arena, working with the owners and founders of public relations firms, and worked with them on how to run their businesses better. And then I got into mergers and acquisitions, and not too long after, Rich joined me. What we do, what the Stevens Group does, is we work with both buyers and sellers, and we help them organize their vision for the future. And we try to reflect to them that one of the ways that a business can grow is through acquisitions. A PR firm can grow organically, but if it wants to really add critical mass at various points in its state of business, it can make acquisitions and look at niches that are really complementary to what they do. So that's an arena that Rich and I have gotten into, and we kind of provide a sounding board to PR agency and digital marketing firm owners and CEOs. We work with them. We understand their issues. We understand their challenges, and we think that our success is reflected in the fact, that we have done any number of deals over the past 6, 7, 8 years.
Art, thank you so much for that wonderful overview. And with that, let's get into the discussion and talk about 2018. And really, gentlemen, where has the year gone? As 2018 is winding down, I'd love to start our discussion with your thoughts on some of the M&A trends the Stevens Group has seen during the course of the year. For example, and I'm not sure if these are appropriate terms, but has 2018 been a bull or bear market? And I throw these questions out to both of you, so please feel free to both chime in, however we want to do this.
Sure. Rich, why don't I start, and you can pick up as you like. 2018 has been a bull year, continues to be a bull year for mergers and acquisitions, and there are a number of reasons for this. Again, as I said just a few moments ago, a lot of larger, both independent and holding company-owned public relations firms are sensing that one of the unique ways to grow is through adding critical mass by acquisition. But one of the trends that's taken place is that agencies that have never before been in the arena of acquisition have suddenly joined the ranks because they understand that they can add to their management strength and add to niches or locations around the country or the world by adding really highly selective and qualified agencies to acquire. So it is definitely a bull market, and we also find that sellers, in addition to buyers, there are a lot of sellers coming out of the closet, if you will, who also believe that they can enhance their future role by selling to a complementary agency where they can continue to play a role, and through the synergies of both buyer and seller, they can continue to grow. Rich?
Well, Faye, thanks for having us on today. Much appreciated. I think Art said it all. I think that the way you framed the discussion earlier, Faye, when you referred to trends, I think the only thing I would add to what Art said is that what we're seeing from say January 2018 to now coming towards the end of the year is really a significant acceleration in the rate of in terms of our business anyway, in the numbers of calls and inquiries we're getting from PR agencies, both on the buy and sell side, and from people outside of the PR industry who private equity firms are a perfect example, marketing consultancies that are now beating down our door to have us look for opportunities for them, and the pace of the calls, the numbers of inquiries we're getting online, on the phone, it just seems to it's just picking up. It's like a car, going around a racetrack, just going faster and faster and faster. And it kind of feels like we're in the car. And we're just trying to keep up. So wow. I would say trend-wise, it seems that, and it doesn't seem at all like it's about to slow down. If anything, it's just gotten more robust and more robust as the months go by.
Gosh, that led to my next question, Rich. I was wondering if by quarter, so it sounds like the year has been building, if that pace has been consistent from January, or, is there one quarter that might have done better than the other, or has it been pretty solid all throughout 2018?
I could start. I think that it just could be my sense of it. I haven't sat down and actually looked at how many inquiries we got, so I don't have, empirical data to share with you, but it's just my sense of it that, in fact, the last 6 months seems to have, something's exploded. There's been just more activity in the second half of the year than I've seen in the last 3.5 years that I've had the good fortune to work with Art Stevens, and it just so I don't think there's any one quarter. I would just say that like I'm getting mid-year, it just started to pick up, and it's building. It continues to build.
It's very encouraging. Overall, was there anything about your experience as M&A advisors and facilitators this year that was very different than in years past?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, it's kind of keeping up with the Joneses in a way. A lot of agencies that have been acquired are talking it up among their colleagues who own independent firms themselves. And for the most part, the experience has been a very good one. We've been very careful about putting buyers and sellers together to make sure that there's truly a fit, and that there are pronounced synergies, and that they both work in a very collaborative, very positive culture. So sellers have had very good experiences, and they talk it up among their colleagues out there and in the networks and the conferences they attend, and so it's like a domino effect. So other sellers, other agency owners think to themselves, "My God, he's so happy or she's so happy. This sounds like something I might want to do." And so they begin to make inquiries, and they reach out to firms like us. We are very gentle because it's a big quality of life decision in so many ways. It is a change, but then again, owning an agency is a major asset, that a lot of sellers, can cash in on. And so we have worked with more sellers this year than ever before. We are up to our eyeballs, in discussions with sellers and buyers, and that trend will continue. So this year, as Rich indicated, is like a snowball rolling down the hill. It's gathered momentum, and it continues to gather momentum and will continue to do so in 2019.
Fascinating. I'm wondering, since we're talking about sellers, do you run across sellers who would rather sell to their key employees? Is that part of the trend, or?
We see some of that.
I could say that Art has a perspective too on this, but we don't see as much of that. I wouldn't say that that's been. It's not that it's something that the owner of agencies doesn't consider, but it's more the exception than the rule. In our experience, that a seller will come to us and start talking to us about wanting to sell to their employees, because if that were the case, then they would come to us in more of a consulting role rather than in the role of that we play more often than not, most often actually, as facilitators first in helping a buyer or seller find a match, and then help to nurture the discussions that the two principals have with one another to some completion. If an owner has already made the decision or is dead set on selling to his or her own employees, then they may go a different route. I mean, they may bring us in for consultation, or they may do it with the help of legal counsel.
Thank you,
Well, there are
Rich.
also a few marketplace realities, Faye, in connection with selling to key employees or selling to outside agencies. The fact of the matter is that you're never going to get as much money. A PR agency owner will never get as much money by selling to his key employees than he would selling to an outside agency, because the employees don't have the money. The owner can work out a long-term solution, or payout with his key employees, but they will never be able to cough up enough of the purchase price as an outside agency. So the only sellers who sell to their key employees are those that feel that they have made enough money and probably want to get out of the business sooner and not necessarily work with an acquiring agency and turn it over to key employees. I've seen mixed success at that because a lot of key employees are not necessarily entrepreneurs, and they're very fearful about wearing a business hat as opposed to consulting with clients on public relations matters. So that's why a very small minority of PR agency owners sell to their key employees. One, it's not financially feasible, and two, they've got to have the right kind of key employees who are truly entrepreneurs, and not too many people who don't own their own agencies are entrepreneurs.
No, there is an art involved. Art, thank you. I'm wondering, since we're talking about this bull market, and given how robust the M&A market has been in the PR agency world and how intense the competition has become to build critical mass, how would you characterize which principal in a deal, the buyer or the seller, seems to have the upper hand in PR agency M&A deals these days? Ooh, this is a toughie. Gentlemen, who would like to chime in first?
Well, which has the upper hand? I think that what we're seeing is this is a way to answer your question. What we're seeing is more flexibility on the part of buyers to accommodate the needs of the seller. There had been a formula that were used by buyers when making acquisitions that the buyers sort of stuck to. This is how I do a deal: A, B, C, D, take it or leave it. But because of the nature of the competition for the nature of the competition in general, to find a good agency, to find an agency to acquire that meets your needs and objectives, we're finding that buyers are now more inclined than they were before to offer the seller more than they used to, and they are more flexible in terms of working with the seller to accommodate what the seller feels that they deserve to get for their businesses, even if it doesn't conform to the letter with the buyer's way of doing acquisitions. So that would suggest that, while I wouldn't go as far as to say it's entirely a seller's market, I don't think that's the case. But what we are seeing is that it's becoming more of a seller now has a stronger position in the negotiation process than they had in the past.
Well, I agree with Rich, and I'll just add one more thing, Faye. It's a seller's market if the seller is in certain niches and is able to demonstrate, a set of results financially, that obviously reflects a well-run business and a business, that has all the potential for continuing to grow in the future. So, for example, if a seller is in healthcare, which is a hot field these days, and if the seller is doing, say, a 20 or 25% profit margin, or EBITDA, as they call it, and that seller has shown dramatic growth over, the previous 3 years, then that seller has the upper hand. So some of it has to do with niche, needs, availability, success, and financial. But if a seller, has all of those criteria, then the seller would have the upper hand.
Art, thank you. You brought up healthcare. I'm wondering, what are the other hot niches in 2018?
Well, the other hot niches are healthcare, they're public affairs, they're financial services, and certainly technology. I would say technology is up there with healthcare. If a firm, has clients in the technology arena, it is highly valued. So those are among the hot niches.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I second that. And just for a moment, I'd like to go back to a question you asked earlier, Faye.
Sure, please, Rich, go ahead.
Regarding the robustness of the M&A market, I think that what we're finding is this, and everyone now is familiar with the decision that Amazon made to pick New York City and Washington, D.C., basically, to put up HQ2, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why did they do that? Well, clearly, if you look at the infrastructures of New York City, they surely didn't come here because the housing market is inexpensive or because transportation is quick and convenient. I mean, these are not the things, if you live in New York City, that you tend to praise. I mean, if you live in the city, I mean, it's dysfunctional in a lot of ways, New York City, with respect to those things. But the reason a company like Amazon chose these two markets is because of the preponderance of talent in these two areas, in these two regions of the country. And I think that we're sensing, I wouldn't call it a panic. That would be an overstatement. But there is a real need being driven by pressure, being put on agencies by their clients to get up to speed on all things digital. And the agencies are finding themselves, many, that they're coming up short when the clients come knocking on their door and saying, we want this, we want that, we want you to justify the value you bring in some empirical way, and we want to look at some analytics that give the C-suite reason to continue spending on public relations, and many agencies are being caught with their pants down because they just don't have it, and they then need it quickly. And I think we're seeing very often when we get inquiries from buyers who want to make acquisitions, what Art was saying before about the categories they're looking for, it's very often one of those 4 or 5 categories that Art mentioned that they want to acquire, or an agency that has an expertise in one of those categories, or more than one. But always towards the end of the conversation we have with buyers, they'll say, and oh, by the way, the Stevens Group, if you happen upon a digital marketing agency, we'd be interested.
Okay.
And the reason being is that these agencies that they want in that category really aren't that plentiful outside of the major metropolitan areas, and they're harder to find, and these firms are desperate to find them because their clients are demanding the services.
Interesting. Since you bring up geography, I'm curious, what geographic regions or cities in the U.S. were of most interest to buyer agencies in 2018?
I would say the major markets are still of interest. The West Coast, San Francisco, Los Angeles, certainly Chicago. Certainly New York continues to be of interest to many buyers around the country, having a foothold, in the New York marketplace. Florida is becoming of greater interest. Miami, Orlando, even Tallahassee, Detroit. I would say the major markets, but there are also gems. And a lot has to do with, again, the niche that a firm is in. So there may be firms that are not precisely in the major market category, but in, say, the second level of cities in the country that have niches that are of interest to buyers. So that becomes a factor. So geography is of interest to some buyers as sort of their first consideration. They may have offices in those cities and they want to add to it, or they may not have offices in second cities and want to establish a foothold there. So I would say that we've had clients in a variety of locations throughout the U.S., speaking domestically, and some sellers have been of great interest in what you would call lesser markets than the primary markets because of what they do, how their firm is run, and the financial success that they've achieved.
Art, thank you. I'm wondering, as far as 2018, have there been buyers and sellers looking to expand their footprint beyond domestically, internationally, or has the activity primarily been in North America?
It's been international as well. I would say primarily domestically, but there are firms that want to establish a foothold. I would say, London or the UK is of great interest to a lot of buyers. They'd like to have a foothold, in London primarily, as a stepping stone to the continent. Brexit notwithstanding, and they very often are looking at London firms. Now, we have a very strong affiliate, Mark Matson, who is an affiliate partner of ours, and we refer business to him in terms of his needs. He has buyers in the UK and the continent who are looking for firms in the US, and vice versa. We have buyers looking for firms in London, and we work with Mark to target specific firms that it would be of interest to our buyers, and initiate discussions. So I would say the UK is of great importance to a number of buyers.
Fascinating. So Art, overall, what role does agency location play in potential buyer interest?
Well, there are a lot of buyers who are large regional firms. Some of them don't show up in the traditional, agency rankings. What's of interest to Rich and me is that a lot of firms do extraordinarily well, have great track records and clients, and are sort of under the radar screen. So our job is really to obviously do more and more vetting of PR firms throughout the country. And so, we are finding that a lot of out of New York City firms would like to get a foothold in New York, and so they come to us and ask us to identify, say, a potential acquisition that would give them an office in New York. Having an office in New York is becoming more important to a lot of agencies. So that's a trend we're also seeing.
Thank you. We've been talking a lot
New
about
York City remains the media capital, the media capital. And to the point I was making earlier about Amazon coming here, they're coming here because there's a preponderance of talent. I mean, the New York Times did a story this morning where they made reference to the fact that, where they get this data, I'm not sure, but they claim that the article claimed that there are 320,000 people living in the metropolitan New York area who have the skill set to work for Amazon. So that's the reason they chose to come here, because they're people that they can hire who live in the area, who can get to the office and do the work. And I think that the firms that are looking at New York, apart from New York being a media capital, or looking at San Francisco, as Art said, or Chicago, are going there because they can get the kind of people that they have access to, the talent that they require. Where elsewhere in the country, it's not that it doesn't exist, but not to the same degree, or the degree of concentration, I should say.
Rich, thank you. Gentlemen, we've been speaking a lot about the buyer's perspective. Let's shift gears a little, if we could, to talk about the sellers a little bit more. This year, when speaking with agency CEOs who want your help finding them a buyer for their firm, has anyone among the typical reasons CEOs have had for wanting to sell his or her firm become a more dominant reason or reasons than any other for wanting to sell their firm? What's motivating them to sell this year is what it comes down to.
There's been a switch in trends over the years. Some years ago, people would agency owners would want to sell their agencies so they could exit, pretty quickly and cash in on, what their asset is worth, in terms of a purchase price and say an earn-out over a period of time. So exit strategy was, I guess, the primary reason. But that was also a period of time when there weren't as many acquisitions as there are currently. And that trend has continued in terms of more and more acquisitions pretty much every year over the past 10 years. But the one trend that we're seeing, is that exit strategy is not number one on the list anymore. What's number one on the list is kind of jump-starting a career of an agency owner who's been running his or her own business for a number of years and, has to deal with the back office and the admin and, and all the headaches that go with actually running a business as opposed to the business that it's in, and that is providing public relations services to clients. So one of the major trends we're seeing is that sellers, the owners of firms that want to sell, really want to stay on. They don't want to retire. They don't want to exit. They'd like to connect, with the larger agency that acquires their firm, contribute to it, help the unit that they bring into the larger agency continue to grow, but play a greater role, in the management of the parent company. So providing, a more stimulating future is one of the great trends that we're seeing for agency owners.
Wow, thank you, Art.
And one of the other, pardon me, Faye, but one of the other trends we're seeing, I don't know if it's a trend, but the sellers, or they're looking to sell because we hear them say that they've been fighting the good fight. They've built a business, and it's a business that provides them with a good quality of life, but they seem to have hit a wall, and they can't break through to the next level, and they want to. But for whatever reasons, they seem to be stuck in third gear, and they want to be able to shift into fourth, and they can't seem to do it alone. So they're looking at their, it's a soul-searching exercise, and they're saying, well, how am I going to grow? I can't quite seem to make it up to the next level. Maybe I ought to join forces with a firm that's already there at plus. That's 5 times the size of my business, and they could help me build from where I am to where I'd like to get to in much, much, much less time.
Interesting. Keeping in the seller's mindset here, gentlemen, have you seen any change in sellers' preferences in terms of the types of buyers they would most prefer having as their new owner? Wow, this is a tough question. Sorry. Who does someone want to sell to?
Well, chemistry is always a key factor. I mean, they want to sell to a firm that philosophically is in the same mind space as they are, and sees the world the way they do. And by that I mean looking at what the buyer wants to do with his or her business going forward. Is it consistent with what the seller wants to do and is dreaming of doing? So is there that kind of compatibility between the buyer and the seller in terms of their business philosophy? That's critical. The other ingredients that we see is that the seller wants to join forces with an agency where they won't be shunted off to the corner. They want to be an integral part of the organization. There are endless stories that we've heard about what happens to sellers when they sell to one of the big holding companies, and they get lost. And those stories are familiar to any CEO that's in our business or in the public relations agency business. Well, they don't want that for themselves. They want to be acquired by a firm that's going to value them and bring them, into the conference room, on the board, on the management team, making decisions about the future growth of the firm. They want to be part of the organization in its totality, and not just those guys over in the corner over there that do this thing that we bought them to do.
Thank you. I'm wondering, Art, your thoughts about this as a follow-up. Rich, thank you. Deals don't always go through to completion. once we begin this M&A dance, what are the reasons acquisition discussions may break down?
Well, a few reasons. One of them primarily, is the offer. I guess what we try to do is have a reality check, with our clients who are mostly sellers. We have clients who are buyers too, but I think we have more sellers than buyers. And our job, is to do a reality check to make sure, that they understand, what the current marketplace, valuations are for public relations firms, what the criteria are financially as well as track record and so on. And we try to make sure that we have the same discussion with buyers as well. We try to find out, and we of course, since we have done work with a lot of buyers, we kind of know what the formulas are of different buyer organizations. And so we try to, to mix and match and to bring buyers and sellers together where we think that, that an offer could be put forward that would be of great interest and excitement, to both parties. But they do break down. We occasionally run across a situation where sellers do have an inflated sense of their marketplace value, and despite all the discussions we may have with them, they won't budge from that. And if that's the case, then clearly not only does the conversation with one particular buyer end, but the likelihood is that we obviously can't work with them if they have an unrealistic assessment of what the marketplace will bring to them. So the offer is one thing, and the second is occasionally, there as the buyer does more due diligence, there may be some conflicts of interest, where let's say each is working for a different hotel chain, and the buyer then has to determine from his or her client whether acquiring an agency with a competing hotel chain would be approved by the present client of the buyer. Sometimes buyers will say yes, sometimes no. So conflicts of interest are another reason. And two, sometimes as they have more meetings in person, which we always advocate and encourage, they may find that maybe the chemistry isn't quite right. That each side of the table, buyer and seller, may have different values, and sometimes that stops the discussion. So those are among the top components of when a deal falls apart.
Art, thank you.
I would add one more. Number 4, I would add is human nature. It sometimes it leaves Art and me with it shaking our heads when deals go south over something that was completely and totally unexpected. But when a person has built, started a business, built it up, it's a member of the family. It's like one of their children, and they're about to sell it. There are oftentimes, as I say, it's human nature where the decision to not proceed with a buyer isn't rational. It's entirely driven by emotion. And something that the buyer says, or something that appears in a contract that the buyer barely read, one of these long 25, 30-page contracts that lawyers do up in a purchase agreement, and the buyer reads through it quickly, and this is a lie. And it happens to say something in that particular sentence that the seller is offended by. And regardless of what the buyer says, how apologetic the buyer might be about that line and his or her willingness to change the line, however the seller wants it to read, the seller's already, they drop they leave the conversation. It ends, and it's purely emotional. And when it goes there, you need a psychologist, not an M&A advisor to rescue the deal.
Oh, my goodness. Gentlemen, I'm wondering, have you seen any changes in 2018 in the revenue size sweet spot of seller firms that buyers are most interested in acquiring?
Yes, and the reason is because even smaller agencies that in the past you would never even think that they would be interested in making acquisitions, given their size. But we're seeing agencies today that are, 3, 4, 5, 6 million in revenue join the party. They're interested in smaller acquisitions, of certain niches, locations, size, etc. These agencies are the ones that traditionally are mostly on the market to be acquired. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 million. That's a current sweet spot in terms of the size that buyers are looking for to acquire agencies. But agencies that size are also looking to increase their critical mass by making their own acquisitions. So that is a trend that we've not seen before, where more and more buyers are firms with smaller revenues than ever before.
Art, thank you. And it's interesting. It's crystal ball time, gentlemen. Why don't we end in the discussion of what are your thoughts about 2019 and what tips for agency buyers and sellers? Is the bull market going to continue? Are we going to shift into a bear market?
I see that sellers and buyers are going to continue to be active. The snowball is still rolling down the hill, and there is great interest. We're getting so many calls that I think we'd have to, almost triple the size of our staff at the Stevens Group. But
it's a great problem, Art.
It's a happy problem. There's no question about that, because we're seeing a tremendous amount of action, in the industry. I mean, acquisition is becoming the norm and the rule rather than the exception. There's no question about it. And, I would say you'd see more and more buyers, not just the same old buyers, that you may read about in publications like yours, Faye, and other PR trades. You're going to see more and more buyers, that are coming out of the woodwork, to do deals, because they're getting the sense too that it's a way to grow, and it's a sound business decision. So there will be more and more buyers, and there will be more and more sellers, because sellers are getting jealous of seeing other firms announced as being the latest acquisition out there in the marketplace, and so more and more sellers for the reasons that we cited. So I think 2019 is going to be a continuing bull year, in the mergers and acquisitions arena, and you'll see agencies come out of the woodwork that you've never heard of before, either buying or selling.
Fascinating.
I think that to add to what Art said, I think that the rate of growth in 2019 is going to mimic the rate of growth in the advancement of technology. The technologies that public relations agencies need to become expert in are advancing at such a clip, and the demands on those agencies by their clients to be conversant and expert in the use of those technologies is putting so much pressure on agencies that the growth of acquisitions will be made will almost parallel the rate at which technology will evolve and advance in 2019. Because what we have today is Facebook and Twitter. By next year, there's going to be new social media channels. There's going to be new things that agencies will need, and they may not be able to find them in the open market. They may have to do it through acquisition. And I think they're going to be walking joined at the hip in terms of the rate at which the acquisitions are made and the rate at which technology evolves.
Well, Rich, thank you. Rich Jachetti, Art Stevens. It's wonderful to get this positive insight about 2019, your reflections on a fascinating and active 2018. And we can look forward to continuing the conversation between the Stevens Group and the CommPro community during what sounds like will be another bullish year. With that, I say thank you again. And
thank you,
now,
Faye. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well,
We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.